What's up, everybody? UFC 307 has just concluded, and Poatan is still the champion after a great fight. I mean, what a war and what a warrior both of those guys are. I mean, Rountree's getting a lot of credit for what he endured and the way he took the fight to Pereira, and rightfully so. But I think you got to give a lot of credit to Pereira as well for he got dropped by Khalil at one point after he missed that head kick. Khalil just dipped beautifully and came over top with the right hand, and I thought both guys went out and fought brilliantly, and Khalil definitely surpassed expectations, I think, especially for keeping the fight on the feet the entire time. He never tried to shoot once, so that was a great fight. But we'll start at the bottom of the card, kind of work our way back up. The prelims I saw, but I was also cooking dinner and shit, you know what I mean? I saw mainly the main card. But the big fight on the prelims that I want to talk about, how about Joaquin Buckley knocking out Wonderboy? Only the second guy to ever do it. And, we talked about this, or I talked about this on the last podcast with what I thought Khalil needed to do to find success against Pereira. When you're fighting the taller guy, you have to find angles, and if you can put their back on the cage, man, you can find those shots because, like I said, you limit their mobility. They can only travel in this sort of like arc, right? Like they can dip their head this way, but there's no leaning back. And Wonderboy is obviously a master in open space. I thought he looked really good throughout the first couple rounds in that fight. I mean, he looked like he hadn't lost a step despite being 41 years old. But when Buckley starts moving his head like that and bobbing and weaving, he's got some power. And he found that angle, got in, landed the big shot on Wonderboy and put Wonderboy out cold. So as a Wonderboy fan, that's kind of hard to watch, obviously. That was a tough one, but it's a big win for Buckley. And I loved his call out too, calling out Usman. That's a great call out. The welterweight title picture is obviously like you got Shavkat up there. Usman's calling for his shot at Bilal. So who knows how that's going to shake out, but I love the call out by Joaquin Buckley too. And 5-0 since moving to welterweight. He looks like a different person, man. And we talked about this a little bit on the last one too, but he just feels like he's coming into his own, you know? And Wonderboy is a tough fucking challenge, and to knock him out like that, like I said, Pettis is the only other guy that's ever done it, right? And, big win for Buckley. And a good way to warm us up for the main card. That was a big knockout to end the prelims. Let me look real quick. I think there were a few other bigger fights on the... My God, my computer's going so fucking slow. For whatever reason, I've got a Mac. If I run Chrome, it crawls. I have to use like fucking Brave, the browser, to look at anything with any sort of speed. But, Yasmin Lucindo, I missed that fight. I was making dinner. Alexander Hernandez picked up a split decision over Austin Hubbard. Almeida picked up a unanimous decision over Pereira. Ryan Spann is quick with that guillotine, man. I mean, he got OSP hurt and then he snapped straight onto that shit, and you can tell he's got that locked down. Tisha Pennington picked up a win over Carla Esparza. The judges. This brings up a good point. The judging last night, I felt like was pretty fucking bad. And this was our first indicator of it, right? When Pennington went out and picked up the win over Esparza. I don't even have a problem. Like, I feel like we throw the word robbery around a lot. I don't even have a problem with Pennington winning the fight, but 30-27 is crazy. 30-27 is fucking insane, right? And when you get judges that are turning these scorecards in, it's like, man, what are we doing to hold these people accountable? Because... I don't know. We'll talk about this more when we get up to the Aldo and Bautista fight because, again, I think we throw that robbery word around a little bit. But, the judging last night was not the best. And did you guys also notice what was up with there's like this strange thing going on with the refs where it's like you're given like 10 seconds to work up against the cage in the clinch, and they're like hopping in telling you to work immediately. It's like that is work. That position is a tough position to be in. And if it wasn't, Aldo would have got out of it more often. We'll talk about that all later. But, let's jump on to the main card now. So, Kayla Harrison goes in, picks up a pretty dominant victory over Ketlin Vieira. I mean, Vieira had her moments, but for the most part, this was a big win for Harrison. And when she was able to get the fight to the ground in the first and third round, complete domination. I mean, she was so much more advanced than Ketlin on the ground. Harrison has... In my opinion, though, she's got to clean some of the striking up a little bit. She's lunging at things, and I think that the grappling, she's going to be so much better on the ground than a lot of the girls that she faces, but it's going to be hard for her to get to the takedown attempts if let's say she's not having success up against the cage, right? And she was struggling a little bit with Ketlin last night up against the cage to get the fight to the ground. When that's difficult, it's going to help a lot to be able to because when you back your opponent up against the cage, like we just talked about, you're limiting their space, but you can start firing off shots, and then that lets you level change. Judo is a great base, but I really think that if Kayla Harrison can just like clean up some of her striking and get to her target with her punches, right, as opposed to lunging in, I think she has a really good chance to start level changing and getting this fight to where she has a big advantage over folks. But I'll tell you what, man, watching how she performed against Ketlin last night, it was good, but when you watch Rocky and Juliana Pena fight, man, those are both a tough fight for Kayla Harrison, in my opinion, especially considering they're going to be 5-round fights. So if Kayla's not able to get him out of there in the first 2 rounds, the cardio for those girls is going to take I would think that they're going to have a better cardio base than Kayla Harrison. To me, it felt like Kayla slowed down just a little bit, but she did power through in the 3rd round and dominate that 3rd round in a manner that I didn't quite expect. I kind of thought she might burn herself out after the first 2 rounds trying for things if she wasn't able to get the finish, but she did finish strong. I will say that. But I do think it's going to be a different animal when you've got somebody like Pena who's going to be able to, who just has good grappling herself and is willing to kind of sit down and throw some of those unorthodox strikes at you, right? Like sit down on her punches. So big win for Kayla Harrison. And you got to think, I mean, I know Juliana Pena called out Amanda Nunes, but you got to think that Kayla Harrison is next in line for the title now. I mean, who else is left? And I will say this, I think Kayla Harrison is Rocky, I thought, we'll get into this later too, but Raquel Pennington is just herself, right? She's just not as like loud on the mic. And Pena's definitely got like a little bit of a bigger mouth and stuff, but I think Kayla Harrison represents the sport really well. She is good on the microphone. She's got some charisma, some like swagger to her. And I think that Kayla Harrison winning and fighting for the title next, if she can win the title, it's going to be really good for the health of the women's division. I think it's just going to bring attention to it because she's not afraid to speak her mind. She talks a little bit of shit. You know what I mean? She's comfortable up there talking. And yeah, I think Kayla Harrison's very promising, but the striking, I really think if she can just get that striking cleaned up, it's going to open up so many more takedown opportunities for her. And, you know, she got the first takedown out in open space against Ketlin Vieira, right? It didn't come up against the cage in that first round. So if she can just get those hands going, right, and make those hands a little bit more of a threat, get there with her footwork and get the hands of her opponents going up, I think it'll open up wrestling opportunities for her as well. And like I said, for her, it doesn't matter if you throw the girl to the ground with the judo. Who cares? Who cares if it's a fucking hip toss, uchimata, whatever, or a double leg? As long as you get the fight to the ground, she's going to be a lot better than a lot of girls in that position, right? And she's strong. She used to fight up to what? I think as high as 155 pounds. So she's making 135. She looks good at 135, and she just needs to find a way to get this fight to where she does her best work. So I think that last night was an eye-opener for her because in the Holly Holm fight, she kind of did it at will, right? She just kind of bullied Holly Holm. And, man, Holly, too, had taken like more of a wrestling approach, so I thought Holly would put up a better, you know, maybe a little bit of a better defense in that regard, but there's levels, right? And Ketlin's takedown defense was okay, but like I said, once it went to the ground, domination by Kayla Harrison. Roman Dolidze picked up a big win over Kevin Holland last night, and I was a little bit disappointed that Holland's rib popped out. And if you guys have never had a rib pop out, it had to happen to me in jiu-jitsu like, I can't, 6 months or a year ago, I can't remember, but it is like incredibly painful to just like bend over or do anything. So when you're trying to grapple, I mean, for Holland to survive till the end of the first round while he was doing that and not even verbally submit, I mean, that's a tough thing to do. Popping a rib out fucking sucks. And there's nothing they can really do about it. Like you go to the doctor and they're like, yeah, you just let it heal. Right? I kind of thought they were going to like move it back in or some shit. And they're like, nah, just deal with it till it heals up. And it takes months to heal up. So it'll be a little bit, I think, before we see Kevin Holland back in the octagon. Dolidze was looking really good. He was able to get to the wrestling, but man, if this fight could have went 2 or 3 more rounds, I was interested to see if Holland would avoid some of those like wrestling situations and try to keep it on the feet. Obviously, Dolidze had the wrestling advantage, right? And Holland probably does, but Holland has good jiu-jitsu, man. And but after the rib popped out, like I said, it's just so hard to mount any sort of like defense and not how you want to fight. So big win for Dolidze. Dolidze's grappling is high level, but I was excited because both of these guys are so fucking good off their back. Like Holland has a bunch of submissions off his back. Dolidze is always rolling through and birding, hitting those knee bars and stuff like that. So I was looking forward to this fight playing out and just seeing how Dolidze, if he was able to repeat that same thing, like keep getting the fight to the ground and get into top position. But I will say, when Dolidze was on top of Holland, there weren't a lot of moments where I felt like Holland was going to be able to be effective off his back. Normally he's able to get the angle, but Dolidze just seemed like he was a step ahead of everything that Holland was throwing up at him. Like even when he went for the armbar attempt where he did pop his rib out, Dolidze was ready for it, man. And then he just advanced position after Holland hurt himself and started raining down some punches and shit. So big win for Dolidze. Holland was a favorite going into this fight, so it's good for Dolidze to pick up that win. And a little bit disappointing how it ended, but it is what it is. All right, Mario Bautista versus Jose Aldo. I would say that this one right here probably generated the most amount of controversy among fans. And I think that we have to, again, we're going to touch on this again. You've got to be careful about how you talk about robberies, because I know that what we saw out of Mario Bautista last night when he's just pushing Aldo up against the cage and kind of clinching there and just going for takedowns that you have a feeling he's never going to land. I know that's frustrating, and it's easy to want to give the fight to Aldo based on a few punches that he lands in that round. But I felt like Bautista won. Again, I know that everybody loves damage and striking, and you can call it stalling, and it is. I'm not arguing that. It's stalling. Like, I personally think they should bring back, like, the fucking yellow card. Like, give them the yellow card if they're stalling, and then if not, like, I don't know. I don't know if you deduct a point. I don't know, because you saw, too, if you just separate them, you have to give them a reason to not want to stall. Right? Because at the end of the day, it is a fight, and there's nothing more boring when you're watching jiu-jitsu, fighting, anything like that, than a guy just kind of pushing people up against the cage or holding on to some sort of fucking grip and not doing anything. It is boring. But I don't think we can ignore the fact that Jose Aldo didn't want to be there. And if you don't want to be there, don't get your fucking back pinned up against the cage. It's not that I think, like, again, I'm a believer, like, I think there needs to be something done about stalling, legitimate stalling. Not this stuff where you're actually working for a takedown attempt and transitions are playing out and you're stopping them early just because you want to see two dudes fucking throw punches on the feet. Go watch boxing. But at the end of the day, Bautista won in my eyes. He controlled the fight. Like, again, it's on Aldo to get his back off the cage and keep that fight in the center of the octagon and start teeing off on Bautista if he wants to win. He doesn't want to be there, and Bautista's putting them there. Fucking deal with it. Fights are boring sometimes. I don't know what else to say. Boring fights are what makes fights like Pereira and Rountree so exciting. Boring, just because it's boring doesn't always mean the other dude won or that the dude got robbed. I thought Bautista won the fight. I was a little bit, but you got to think too, Bautista's pathway to victory, he's got so many submission victories on his record, right? That's what he wanted. He wanted to put the fight in the clinch, and in the off chance that he could get Aldo to the ground, then maybe he could have pulled something off. But I also think he realized that Aldo's jab was looking super fucking sharp. Aldo was looking good in those boxing exchanges, and you don't want to be out in open space with him. So if you're not being penalized for it, why wouldn't you just run him up against the cage over and over and over and over again? Why not? You're controlling things. I'm not saying it's my favorite part of the sport, or that I think that there aren't measures there aren't measures that they could take to start like mitigating that a little bit. But at the end of the day, that's the fucking way it goes, man. Like, you're not going to get an exciting fight all the time, and you can get pissed at Bautista if you want, but fuck. What are you going to do? Aldo has to get his back off the cage the same way you got to get up off the ground if you want to stand up. Like I said, I'm a believer, and I'm all for like some sort of change. I don't know about point deductions. I don't know, but you do have to discourage fighters somehow from stalling out in those positions, because it's a sport, right? Like, you want it to look entertaining, but it's also the sport of fighting, and sometimes fights are boring. I know I've said that 100 times, but it's just the truth. I felt Bautista won. I felt that it was a really good fight. One thing I was kind of surprised about, I kind of thought Bautista would be throwing a little bit more of those knees and stuff, a little bit more of his kicks. And he just took this clinch-heavy approach. It got him the victory ultimately, though, and he's going to move on. And, Aldo, unfortunately, has a loss on his record now, and that kind of title run he was maybe hoping to go on is going to get slowed down a little bit. And Aldo, it's not just his age, man. It's the fact that he's getting up there in terms of miles. And I'll say this. Aldo looked super impressive last night. For as many fights as this guy had, kind of like just like Wonder Boy, you keep thinking he's going to slow down at some point, and he just fucking doesn't. He just keeps looking good. But like I said, there's a point where just defend. Also, I've seen this argument online, and I want to address this. There are people who think that you should just get points for defending takedowns. Why? What did you do? Why would that earn you something over the other person? Because you're being defensive, because you defended something? Like, the other person is the one initiating the offense, and you just stopped it. It's not like you did anything or hurt the guy or reversed the position. You just stopped them from taking you down. Why should that earn you more points than the guy shoving you up against the cage and controlling the position? You want to be doing that, if anything. I don't understand. I do feel like there's a lot of like I said, I'm not opposed to like some sort of change, but there are fans out there that are just watching this sport, and I feel like they don't know what the fuck they're watching. Like, I read through these comments, I'm like, you guys are crazy. You guys are crazy. If somebody's pushing me up against, if we're in a fist fight at a fucking, like a street fight, call it whatever you want, and somebody pushes me up against a wall, and they just keep kneeing me over and over again, and I can't move, I'm losing. You don't get points just because you like didn't get taken down. That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. That's so fucking dumb, right? So, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with these fans. I don't know. I think we just got a lot of fucking new Gen Z. I'm a millennial, I think. I don't know. We just got these fucking folks watching fights, and they want it to go a certain way. They pick a fighter. They want it to go their way, and when it doesn't, they get upset. Too bad. It's a fight. Anyway, moving on. I'm beating that horse to death. Juliana Pena versus Raquel Pennington. Another example of some poor judging, in my opinion. I don't know how you... It seemed blatantly obvious to me, and I think anybody else watching it that knows what the fuck is going on. Rounds 1, 4, and 5 are Raquel Pennington's. 2 and 3 are Pena's. This is easy. Raquel Pennington got robbed. She should still be the champion. She was pushing the issue in the 5th round. I don't know how they gave it to Pena. I don't understand it all. And now we got to listen to Pena calling out Amanda Nunes, who's in retirement. A fight that she just got dominated in last time. And you know who the next contender is. It's Kayla Harrison. That has to be the next fight. If Nunes does come out of retirement, I can't see it being for Juliana Pena. Why would you want to do that? But if Kayla Harrison is able to beat Pena, right now we maybe have some interest in Amanda returning. It generates a big super fight, all that stuff. But I just feel like if Pennington had won, and she won. She won the fight. I don't care. There are times where it's like, all right, it was close. I can understand. It's subjective, blah, blah, blah. But this was a robbery. Raquel Pennington got robbed last night. She won the fucking fight. She should still be the champion. I think she would have been much more willing to go on and fight Kayla Harrison next. And then who knows what happens after that. But now we got Pena in there. And Pena's going to call for the Nunes fight. And maybe that's good, because when you start doing stuff like that, it generates storylines. And like we said at the beginning of this podcast, Pena is a little bit more of like a loudmouth on the mic. She's probably going to make a little bit more noise and controversy than Raquel Pennington ever would have if she remained the champion. That's just who Rocky is. But I feel like Amanda Nunes isn't going to come out of retirement for this fight, but it'll do a good job of stirring up some controversy and stuff until they can get the Kayla Harrison versus Pena fight booked. Or, well, no, I was going to say a rematch, but I don't think so. Also, people were talking shit on this fight, calling it like a bathroom break fight and stuff, and it ended up being a good fight. Man, I don't care, whatever. You can say whatever you want. It was a good fucking fight. It was a competitive fight, and Pennington showed up big time. She got her first knockdown in the UFC, and yeah, I thought it was an entertaining-ass fight and a good way to, I thought it was a good representation of the women's bantamweight division, but it's driving me crazy. I feel like Raquel Pennington should still be the champion. I don't know how Pena got that nod. I don't know what the fuck these judges are smoking, but better than whatever I got. All right. Anyway, we'll move on. Main event time. Fight of the night, no doubt. Alex Pereira versus Khalil Rountree Jr. Rountree Jr. did much better than we could have anticipated. I mean, there's a good argument. I think he won the first 2 rounds, and he dropped Pereira at one point, landed a nice head kick on him, and he was just always there throwing. He was willing to sit there and kickbox with Pereira, which is a tough challenge. And he's given Pereira arguably his toughest fight in the UFC so far, aside from obviously Izzy getting a finish over him, right? Definitely his hardest fight at 205 pounds. So I think Khalil Rountree went in there and exceeded expectations. And what a fucking warrior. I mean, the picture that Dana White posted of his face after the fight, man, he got battered. And then if you guys saw, Joe Rogan was saying when he came back to the booth that Mark Goddard was like, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never heard anybody hit like when Pereira hits somebody. It's just different. It's ungodly. And I can believe it, man. There's just like this fucking, you can tell when he throws that he's got this like crazy power. Like, I don't know how he's obviously a longer guy and he can generate a ton of it, but man, you got to give a lot of credit for Pereira too, for battling through those first 2 rounds and dealing with some of the adversity that Rountree threw at him and finding a way to win. It took him a little bit longer to find his rhythm and get going, but boy, that onslaught in the 4th round was something of legends. It was fucking beautiful. The way he was just sliding out of range, coming back in, throwing knees, big shots, hurting Khalil, bringing the uppercut up through the guard, coming around. Oh, man, he just battered him. Shots to the bodies. He just finds these openings, and when he starts putting it on you and he's drawing these counters out of you and you can't touch him, whoo, impressive. Super impressive. Pereira is a goddamn problem, and he's defended the title, 3 times? He's had 3 title fights in 7 months? That's crazy. That's crazy. He's been on fire lately, and I think he's like, right now, Alex Pereira is probably the biggest superstar that the UFC has. He's loved universally, right? And he goes out there and he puts on a fucking show. And he's also, you want to talk about somebody else who's good on the mic. Pereira's good on the mic. I don't know if you guys saw after Jamal Hill was caught in the crowd like yawning and stuff like that, and Pereira was like, he must still be waking up from UFC 300. He's witty, man. He's good with this stuff. He has good content on social media. He represents the sport well, and he has a fan-friendly style. Another thing, in the pre-fight show, or like the predictions that I put out before the fights, I really thought that he was going to have a hard time landing that calf kick. Wasn't a fucking problem at all. He throws it. He just hides it so well and tosses it out there. And he was just beating up the outside of Khalil Rountree's lead leg. And I thought that would really be a problem for him since Khalil's a southpaw. I really thought that when Pereira shifted his weight to his back foot to throw that kick, that Rountree would be able to use that as an opportunity to kind of sit down and tee off on some punches, but it just never materialized that way. I mean, I really underestimated how well Pereira would be able to sneak that in there. He just does it so brilliantly, just like everything else that he does in the striking department. Yeah, I don't even know what's next for him. You got to think he's fought a lot. I think it would be really advantageous for him to take a break and maybe see how things play out. You got John Jones fighting Stipe. That's going to go down in November. And you got to think, like, who knows what's going to happen with that? Here's what could happen. This could happen. There's a bunch of different ways it could go. But John could walk in, beat Stipe. If he beats Stipe, right? Like, let's just assume he does, which is not, I shouldn't make assumptions, but for the sake of this argument, let's say John walks in November and beats Stipe, and then he decides to retire. That's going to open up the fucking gateway for Alex Pereira and Tom Aspinall, right? If John wins, though, and decides not to retire, John or Stipe, whoever wins that fight, both of those guys could retire. So we might end up getting this fight either way, right? I have a hard time believing if John loses, that's how he's going to go out after the way his career has gone. But let's say John, okay, let's walk through a few different scenarios here. John wins, right? John beats Stipe in November. John retires. Alex Pereira versus Aspinall, I think, is the obvious fight to make for the heavyweight title. Okay? Let's say Stipe wins. Stipe is probably going to retire. I can't see him fighting Tom Aspinall if he beats John Jones. You're going to end your career on a high note, right? Now you got John. Who's John going to fight? John could end up fighting, I don't know. Did they do Pereira and Aspinall in that case? Did they do Aspinall and John Jones? You got to think that Aspinall is going to want to fight the hot hand for the vacant title. So it might be Pereira if it shakes out that way. Or if John fights in November, beats Stipe, and decides not to retire, he's got to fight Aspinall. Aspinall has to be next in line for the heavyweight title. And as long as John's there, you can't make a matchup between Pereira and Aspinall. So, I don't know. We got a bunch of exciting shit. It's just going to depend on how things shake out. But I can kind of see Pereira might have to fight Ankalaev. if Ankalaev can beat Rakic coming up in his fight. I think that's coming up in a few weeks. Maybe hold on, let me look it up. Maybe in like October as well. Let me see. Sorry guys, I'm Googling. They have these AI generated shit. Google's is pretty good, but Braves is trash. I know he's fighting Rakic coming up. I could have swore it was like October 26th. October 26th at UFC 308. So we got Ankalaev and Rakic. You got to think the winner of that fight is probably going to get the light heavyweight title shot. But like I said, it all just kind of depends, in my opinion, on what happens with John and Stipe in November. If John rides off into the sunset, I think the fight, if he beats Stipe and rides off into the sunset, I think the fight to make is Aspinall versus Pereira. And that's going to be a hell of a fight. And that's going to be a hell of a pay-per-view. That's going to do some goddamn numbers. So it's a good time to be a UFC fan. That's going to wrap this one up, though, guys. Kind of a short podcast today. Just kind of I can't even fucking talk. Just kind of going back through the fights and everything, talking about them. Nothing to really break down. I was going to do a breakdown on Ryan Span's guillotine, but he hit it so quick. Just kind of snatched that neck up, jumped over into mount, finished OSP off. And I was going to do a breakdown of Pereira's knockout too, but man, sometimes I watch stuff like that, and sometimes it's just best to leave it alone. Like when I did the breakdown that kind of popped off when Izzy knocked out Pereira, a lot of people were debating, was Izzy playing possum? Was it just a lucky shot? All this stuff. So I felt like it was like cool to dig into that. And striking is not really my forte, but if I can slow things down, I feel like I can make some like decent analysis on what's going on. Last night, you got to let that shit ride. You can break it down all you want, but there's just something beautiful about watching a guy weave in and out, just teeing off on him, controlling the footwork, controlling the range, sliding out of the way of things, and then coming back with big shots of his own. Nah, I ain't going to break that shit down. No way. It needs to be left alone, in my opinion. But yeah, guys, that's all I got. Do me a favor, guys, if you enjoy, hit the subscribe button. Check out my Instagram page. Follow me on Twitter. I have like no following on Twitter, probably because I post fucking so sporadically. And Threads and all that good shit, right? Wherever there's social media, I'm probably there. So check me out there. Give me a follow. All that good shit. I always appreciate you guys tuning in and watching this. So yeah, thank you all. Have a great week. And yeah, check out. We'll have a fight coming up. Who fights this weekend? I don't even know. I've been so wrapped up in this UFC 307 shit. Let's see. We got, Brandon Royval and Tatsuro Taira. That's a good fight. That's a really good fight. Grant Dawson versus Rafa Garcia, Jun Young Park, Brad Tavares. Not the craziest card in the world in terms of like name value. Josh Fremd is fighting on that. If you guys, this is a good time to plug that. If you guys haven't seen that, I did an interview with Josh Fremd. He's a UFC fighter from Pittsburgh, and he's going to be kicking off the main card at UFC Fight Night on October 12th, this coming Saturday. So that's pretty fucking cool. So yeah, I'll put a little card up here if you guys want to watch the video. Pretty good podcast. Really cool of him to I could be a fucking serial killer for all he knows. Really cool of him to come over, take a chance. We did an in-person one here at my house. So that was awesome of him. So if you guys get a chance, watch that. Other than that, though, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up. Keep an eye out for that podcast coming up in the middle of the week. And yeah, have a good one. Thank you all.